This is a message to all my supporters of this podcast. I'm introducing a new supporters program. You can contribute a small amount as a one-off payment to show your love for this podcast. Thank you in advance for all your contributions.
Hi, this is the Absolute Business Mindset podcast. It's created and hosted by Mark Hayward. I am a corporate employee with an entrepreneurial mindset. This podcast will help and support you with new ideas about business. These are my thoughts, ideas, and comments. Today we have John Bura, where he's going to talk us through his career, all the way from coding up to owning and CEO of his business. Hi, John. Nice to see you. Nice to speak to you again. I just wanted to touch base. So we're going to talk about your career and your trajectory to CEO. And it all started in coding in 1997 at a local university. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, so I started
how did you start up doing your coding in 1997?
So I was really into computers. Back then in the 90s, not everyone had a computer, if you can believe that. And I begged my dad to get a computer. And once I did, I was fiddling around with the coding. And, one summer there was, kids are out for summer, so they need to do something.
Yeah.
And they said, well, make your own game in coding. And I'm like, well, that sounds like me. So I went and I loved it. And it was a really, really good course.
Yeah.
And, back then things were not like they are today. Like today, making a game is really easy, but making a game in 1997 was really hard. And it didn't come out with anything that looked good or anything, because it was just so difficult. Like even 10 years ago, it was pretty hard to make a game.
Yeah.
But so I started that, and then I started coding ever since. And, that one thing led to another.
Awesome. And so just to get a bit of an insight into coding in 1997, before we had iPhones, before what was, so you said it was difficult to build games. It was difficult to do most things on computers at that stage with a slow speed and slow capacity. So how was it that you actually sort of built your game up in the 90s?
Like it was a very simple text-based game,
right,
because that's basically what you could do. It wasn't even until the 2000s where you actually had like a good, editor that anyone could use and make a game. So like you basically learn the programming concepts, through that. And, we did make a game, but we also learned a bunch of computing concepts. And it was, some of the things were so difficult that, if you pointed to something, because it was C++, right? If you pointed to something, that thing wasn't there, it would crash. Nowadays, it's kind of laughable to have that happen in any of your game engines. But back then, if you made like the smallest bit of mistake, then it would completely just break your game.
Oh, so we'll talk a little bit further about your gaming at a later stage in this interview. So you from coding, you then started to teach guitar. So what sort of skills did you develop at an early age with actually teaching guitar?
So I was really into a lot of things as a kid. I was a nerd because, again, I spent my summer coding, which in the 90s wasn't really cool to do as it is now. But I was playing music for a long time, and I practiced my guitar like for several hours a day in junior high and high school. And you know what? I found out what guitar teachers made, and it was well above minimum wage. And so I said, you know what? I think I can do that too. Yeah. And, I actually had like a beard in high school, so I looked like I was 24. So that also helped me. But I went to a local guitar store, and I applied to the job, and I passed the interview, and they didn't know I was 18 at the time, right? They didn't know that. But so I got the job, and they basically put 53 students a week to me. And I learned so much with that job, just kind of like, how do you get someone that knows nothing about anything to being good? And music is something that a lot of people want their kids to learn, because it's both creative and technical. And there's a ton of research out there that says if you get your kid to learn music, they'll become smarter. And there's a lot of science behind that too. Years and years, like basically every 2 years there's an article or a paper that comes out that says, hey, if you're into music, then you're probably gonna do better on test scores and just in life in general. So, that was really my first foray into education. And, a couple years later, I got a job at a different studio when I was making 5 times minimum wage, right? Wow. And I had my own studio at my own house. So I learned, like simple things when you're an entrepreneur. It's like, booking clients, keeping clients, delivering a good product. All of this stuff taught me like everything I needed to know about entrepreneurship. And go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, it was staggering that I saw that you had 53 students a week, which is a phenomenal dedication to the teaching.
Yeah. It's funny because I wanted to work a few days and they filled up my whole schedule. And it was actually really difficult at first because, I did teach like a couple friends guitar earlier on, but what happened is that like I was just basically thrown off the deep end and I kind of made it all work. But yeah, it's, I learned a lot in that first job.
And I suppose it's one of those situations, it's sink or swim, isn't it? If you're then exposed to the situation where you've got 53 students, you have to, as you say, keep your clients, keep the momentum of each of those kids that are learning, or I suppose it could be adults as well, that are learning how to do something. And what I like is the fact that you said it's creative and technical. I think that's really important about learning an instrument, because it's one of those situations that it's using both parts of your brain, isn't it, to be being creative and technical. Did that develop your do you think that's helped you going forward in your career, being able to be both technical and creative at the same time?
Absolutely. So there's a few disciplines, and music is definitely one of them, where it's both technical and creative. Like you can write a song and it technically works, but it sounds terrible, right? Right? So, coding is also creative and technical at the same sides. And like, depending on what kind of coding that you're doing, it could be some's a little more technical and some's a little bit more creative. Like front-end development is very creative. Like if you're a front-end developer and your websites don't look good, then that's a huge problem, right? Yeah. So if you're an app developer or game development specifically is very technical and creative at the same time. So it has helped me a lot. And if we fast forward later on in my career, I always make sure that when you build something, it has to look good. It has to feel good, because that's a whole part of the software development experience now. Yeah. We were talking earlier, like in the 90s, like things just had to work, right? And then even in the early 2000s, like if you look at a website from like 2002, like it's hilarious of what people actually passed away as websites now. But today, everything is very well designed, and we can attribute Apple to a lot of that. Like as soon as the iPhone came out, they really they put all of their creative and user experience kind of motifs into the code, like into the code level. And over the years, I've shown people how to access both the creative side and the technical side through coding. And that's given me a huge edge, because in most computer science and computer engineering degrees, they only teach the technical side. Yeah. Like there's no design 101 in a CS degree.
That's awesome. And so you then went into gaming. So just tell me a little bit about how you started developing and coding for games.
So one of the things I wanted to do in 2008 was is I had this algorithm that would compose audio on the spot. Right. And I pitched it to many game developers, but this was 2008 and 2009. Okay. And no one was hiring at that time. So I'm like, okay, why don't I just make a complete game from scratch? Now I did it back like in, 1997 in the early 2000s, but that was a long time ago at this point in time. So I had to find a way to make like an Xbox 360 game. And there was no way for me to learn how to do that. Except there was this DVD set that showed me how to do that. Now, I basically bought the DVD set. I learned how to make an Xbox 360 game, and then I came out with an Xbox 360 game, and I used that for my portfolio. Right. Now, this was around 2010, and having a game for your portfolio like this wasn't as common as it is today. Like nowadays, if you want to get hired as an app developer or a web developer or a game developer, you have to have a really good portfolio. But back then, it was, I basically got a bunch of freelancing gigs, but, it was still pretty difficult to get a job, even though I'd built a complete game from scratch.
And so tell me about the game that you built in 2008-9.
Yeah, so it was a rhythmic shooter. So what it was kind of a game where it was a basic shooter, like a 360 shooter, kind of like Geometry Wars. Yeah. And it had this rhythm to it, and it would kind of create music on the spot. So again, just kind of using everything I've learned to make something into a career. And that's actually a good tip for your listeners, is that even if you if something you do doesn't work out, you can always use that in the next iteration, because life moves so quickly that, you can say, okay, well, that didn't work, or maybe the timing isn't right? Yeah. Like, if you graduated in 2006 or 2008 from university, like there's a whole different options for you. So like sometimes the timing isn't right for your idea or your career, etc. But you can always use that in the next iteration. And
it sounds a bit cliched now with lots of people talking about this, about failing fast, but equally your failures are really important, because as you say, they might not be because the idea is not very good. It could just be a time problem. What would you say one of your failures that you've done anywhere in your career that has really helped you look and go forward from?
Well, one of the things that, again, believe it or not, that by focusing too much on the audio spectrum and not the programming spectrum, because at the time, when you make a game or an app, there's only so much resources that a computer could have. Yeah. Like the first Angry Birds game for iPhone was, they had to employ so many tricks just to get it to run. Right. So they had no computing power for music, and music was kind of an afterthought. Mm-hmm. So I remember just waking up one day and I said, if I was just like a front end developer, and not even a good one, I'd be probably making more money than I am right now doing, like, making my own business and whatnot. Yeah. And then I started to look back, right? In the early 2000s, I was teaching guitar lessons because guitar lessons were in. Like, I could make 5 times minimum wage because they were in. But, 5-6 years later, they weren't in, right? So you really couldn't do the same thing I did earlier. So what I learned from that is that you really have to, especially in tech, look at the buzzwords, right? Okay. Once you look at the buzzwords and you look at what people are hiring for, you want to be able to learn that as quickly as possible so you can get hired or make a product.
Yeah. And so that adaptability in your early part of your career, you say that was one of your strengths, because as you say, it's so linking back to sort of the stuff that I talk about with business and stuff, sometimes it's a buzzword, sometimes it's a process, it's a understanding a concept which is important to adapt and to win. Would you say adaptability is one of the best skills, one of the most useful skills for an entrepreneur?
Absolutely. You have to be able to read the marketplace and see what is going, what's happening essentially.
And how would you read the market? So I recently, about 6 months ago, I did a course on user research, and that was very much being able to get qualitative results and be able to inform the business on how the market is sensing. What sort of skills, what sort of ways were you able to read the market?
So one of the things that I learned over the years is that technology moves pretty quickly, right? And so like 2 years from now, there could be some new buzzword that nobody knows how to do today. And if you know how to do that, then you can go to a VC and get funding. If you're a programmer, you can get a job and you can demand more money. It's just simple supply and demand. So a good example of this is that to make an iPhone game, like in around 2010, it was really, really difficult because they had this programming language called Objective-C, and it was really hard to use, like really, really hard to use. Okay. So they came up with, Apple came up with a new language called Swift, and Swift was amazing. In fact, it's probably one of my favorite coding languages today. Okay. And what I did is I spent 2 weeks, I learned everything there is to know about Swift, and then I put out an 80-hour course all by myself. I'm not even joking. Wow. an 80-hour course all by myself. And what I did is I also put in, I also did a bunch of master classes, and instantly I was one of the top course providers on Swift at the time. So, and because of that, I made quite a bit of money teaching it, and I made quite a bit of money doing the webinars and all those master classes, etc. But it's because I was able to learn Swift so quickly. Yeah. Or I guess you could say I learned Swift swiftly, right? But I learned it so quickly that I was able to capitalize on that. Now, if there's a lot of Swift is kind of old news. There's something new coming out, right? Like the new thing is Flutter, and we have a course on that as well.
And so just interestingly, just touching base on the sort of coding side. So I'm not a coder, but I work with, my job is to work with coders from a tech side. So I'm in the business side of a technology business. Would you say, this is sort of a left field question, but it's just see how it sort of lands. Are you any good at languages, spoken languages, as you have a deep knowledge of coding languages?
We'll be back after a quick break.
Hi, I'm Alex, the host of X Health Show. Meet the future of healthcare. Think X-Men, that's X Health. Actual superheroes behind programming living cells to cure cancer once and for all. Tech that detects preterm delivery in seconds, brain-computer interface, or apps that employ AI to match your disease with the best treatment. X Health Show brings to you visionaries who push the boundaries of healthcare from Switzerland, the heart of Europe and the most innovative country in the world. Let me introduce you to their startups. Head to X Health Show, meet the future of healthcare. Happy to greet you there.
It's funny you ask that, because whenever someone asks me on a forum, do you speak any other languages? I always put C++ as a joke, right?
Yes.
But the actually is no. So I was in a French program in my elementary school days. And I have a little bit of dyslexia, and if you ever learn French, it's some things are swapped in English. So I didn't do very well in that, and I'm not very good at learning like languages. Okay. But coding languages is different. It's a different part of the brain.
Yeah. No, I understand. It was just I was one of the previous people that I interviewed, Richard Abbott, was talking about learning doing a PhD in ancient languages, and he was already a coder and a developer beforehand, and sort of said that he felt it was a natural affinity. Now, obviously, we all learn things differently, as different styles of learning, and so, but I just wondered if that was something that was what was part of your skill set as well. Just to flip back to the gaming side, so just of interest for me, this is a personal question, sophistication of gaming. Like, obviously, I can imagine thinking, we go back to things like Worm and things like that on your old mobile phones up to what we've got now is hugely different. But from the sort of 2008, 2009 side where we had an iPhone, there were games that were on there, everyone was playing was it a PS3 or whatever, and sort of early Xboxes. What's the sort of development of gaming from that stage, from 2008 to now? The sophistication must be in the depth of gaming must be just increased hugely.
Absolutely. So it's completely different. In fact, gaming, like any other technology, continues to just completely innovate. Like, nowadays, there's this Google Stadia, or that's coming out soon, where you can stream a game, yes, which is incredible. Like I wouldn't even imagine that 2 years ago. Yeah. But it's going to be coming out soon, and I'm looking forward to it. But just what the biggest thing is that the tools to make the games are a lot more refined than they used to be.
Okay.
So to make my Xbox 360 game, I had to go through a lot of technical work. Yeah. Just like this thing is not working, and it's really technical. It doesn't improve the game or anything, but in order to get my game into my users' hands, I have to solve it, right? Yeah. There's much less of that now, so people are spending more time on the design of the games, which is what I always tell any aspiring developer to do. Is you always want to spend the most amount of your production time making your product better and not dealing with technical issues. They'll come up, but you don't want to focus on that.
Yeah. And just another question from my interest. So what do you see of gaming with AR and VR? Do you see it as the future for gaming?
So VR is definitely, I can definitely see it. What has to happen is a product has to come out that's so intuitive and so easy to use that it makes obvious sense. And right now there isn't a product like that.
Yeah.
But I can see, the rumor is that Apple has these AR glasses that will completely transform the way we interact with technology. And the rumor is that you're going to be walking down the street, like let's say you're walking down the street in Japan, and the AR glasses will translate everything for you in real time, which I think is amazing. Because if you've gone to a place where you don't speak the language, it's like, what does this do, right? So, but it's definitely going to change, but I'm waiting for the product that's easy to use, and that's the obvious choice.
Yeah, so I have a similar view about voice and sort of Alexa and Google Home and things, is that I like the technology. I think it's a cool tech, but there's not been yet a killer app that's going to catapult it into every room of your house or business or whatever. So I kind of see what you mean by that. The technology is there. We just need the sort of way to make it, as I say, just that killer app, that hit spot where everyone then suddenly wants. So AR, with the Pokemon Go a couple of years ago, that just exploded because it was using the technology, and a certain proportion of the population still loved Pokemon, even from back in the early noughties. So I agree. I think with both VR, AR, and probably things like Alexa and voice, you just need that thing that's the game changer, which makes it a must-have, where both of them are, they're still wants rather than needs, aren't they? So excellent. So I just wanted to now touch about Udemy. So you started becoming a Udemy approved trainer. Now, just for people that aren't aware of Udemy, can you just briefly say what Udemy is and how you got the process of actually being approved by Udemy to be on their website?
So I was one of the first people to be on that platform. So this was back in 2011. And, at that point I had released, and I was credited on about 30 games at that point, through freelancing and through my own games, et cetera, that I've been releasing. And, when I would show people, I was like, yeah, I'm an independent software developer. And they're like, well, how do you do that? Literally everybody said at the time, how do you do that? Yeah. And one of the things as business, like we were talking about, is if someone's constantly asking you the same question, then you should probably think about making a product for that, right? So, in fact, there was this. I was out for drinks, and I met some random person. He was so excited. He's like, I would love to learn how to make this game. I'm like, okay. So I went home, and I'm like, okay, what do I need to do next? So I have all this teaching experience. I have all this gaming experience, and I have all this coding experience. Why don't I put all of them together into this package to make like a really awesome game? And so this game, so I had a course. It was about 35 hours, and it showed people how to make games from start to finish. That's the music, the art, and the coding all together in one course. And I uploaded it to Udemy. And I was one of the first people to do that. And then it went on a site called AppSumo, which was like a deal site like Groupon. Yeah. And then I had made so much money from that. And then I was hooked, right? Like, let's just make as many of these courses as I can. And and it was really good because like a few months ago, my bank account was getting pretty low, right? But as soon as it was Boxing Day actually. So or the day after Christmas, if not everyone celebrates Boxing Day, right?
So can we still find your courses on Udemy?
Yep. Even that old course, it's kind of obsolete though. You can kind of use it still, but if you go to Udemy or our own site, training.mammoth-interactive.com, or our own site, Mammoth Interactive, all our courses are there.
Okay, brilliant. All right, we'll put in the show notes. If you provide me with the details of where these courses are, etc., we can all put them in the show notes. So just taking a slightly different take on everything we've talked about. So you've been a freelancer, you've been a guitar teacher, but you've also been a course designer, and now your current role as CEO and lead developers at Mammoth. So you've always been quite entrepreneurial.
Yes,
Why do you
yes.
think you were more lended towards entrepreneurial routes than other?
Well, I did kind of fall into it, because like there's I did really want to work for a big company, but graduating at a certain time it was difficult to find a good job. But I kind of always knew how to do it, and it's a really good skill to have. Like if you're looking for a side hustle, if you learn how to start your own business, even if it completely fails, right? Like we talked about failing forward, even if it completely fails, you're going to come out of that experience knowing more, right?
Yeah.
And I've always kind of wanted to do this, and it makes the most sense because I'm a walking stereotype. I'm like I'm a divergent thinker, so I can come up with a lot of ideas. I've got a little bit of dyslexia, etc. Walking stereotype as an entrepreneur, so it works out pretty well now.
And your family entrepreneurial? Is there friends that are entrepreneurial, or were you sort of at the edge doing your own thing as a lot of early stage entrepreneurs are?
So, no, my family is not entrepreneurial, but my grandparents were, because you had to be at the time, right?
Right.
But, it's surprising. So when I started doing all this stuff, everyone kind of looked at me like, really, you want to do this? And I'm like, well, yes, I do. Because, I was basically faced with a choice. It's like either, a lot of young people, they get into this kind of loop where if you don't have experience, you can't get a job. But you need a job to get experience, right?
Yeah.
So the way to cut through that is to intern at your own company. Okay. And that's exactly what I did. It's like, look, I can be spending my personal time, doing whatever, but I'm going to be learning things and I'm going to be producing products. And
this is sorry, go on, carry on.
Yeah. And so I said to myself, okay, well, if I do that, eventually it's going to work out. And it eventually did.
And so some of the things I've talked about previously on my podcast is if you're in that sort of dilemma where you haven't got the experience to get a job and you're in that sort of vacuum, interning at a company, just learning from the best person you can find as a gamer or an entrepreneur or businessman, whatever it is, just sort of try and tap into that. But you didn't even, you basically started this off your own back, and if it failed, you then moved on to the next thing, and gaming just sort of stuck. Is that right?
Yeah. And it's actually kind of funny because, gaming anywhere from 2008 till now, or to maybe a couple of years ago, was really, really hot. But then, it's not as hot as some other things like machine learning and data science. That's the hot thing now. And, Mammoth Interactive, we produce courses on that, we also produce a ton of game courses just because there's always that kind of, if you ride the trend, you'll make more money. But at the same time, a trend might go down a bit and level off. And, we find that with gaming now. So that's basically where it's at.
And you're based in Vancouver?
Yes.
Yes.
Vancouver, Canada.
Canada. Have you always been in Vancouver with all your businesses?
No. So I grew up in Calgary, Alberta, moved to Toronto, and then I moved to Vancouver. So kind of the big cities of Canada.
Okay. Awesome. So just to bring me on a little bit further on the business side. So you started Mammoth. I can't recall what year. What year did you start Mammoth?
So the current one is 2011.
Okay, and just how did you get investment for it? Because a lot of people who are thinking about starting businesses always think of it as, well, I've got to get venture capitalists, I've got to get seed funding, I need that injection of money to be able to be successful. And I start from a viewpoint that you don't always need to start from that point. It can be helpful if the business suits that type of investment, but did you start it with investment, or did you start it as a sort of bootstrap?
So like I said earlier, my money was dwindling before I got that big course to take off. So it's basically all self-funded, and to this day, it's all self-funded. But we do run into the problem where, you have to compete with these multi-million-dollar companies. And what's crazy about Mammoth is that we have some courses that these multi-million-dollar companies don't have. And we're so lean. And what I would recommend is you should try and at least bootstrap something before you go to an investor, because the last thing an investor wants to see is, hey, I built this simple app, I need $10 million. I mean, you're probably not going to get it at that point. You're going to have some kind of track record. But it's difficult. And with the corporate world becoming more monopolistic day by day, it becomes even harder.
And how many do you employ in your company?
So we have about 5 people. We have 5 people.
And are they all coders and developers who sort of traverse into other areas, or how's the sort of makeup of the business?
So I have a couple coders. I have a graphic designer and an assistant and a video editor.
Awesome.
Yeah, and the thing about my business is that it's extremely lean, right? Like a lot of startups are lean, but the people that I've employed, and this is a big tip, is you always want to hire the right people.
Yes.
Okay, and if the person's not the right person, you got to get rid of them right away.
Yeah.
So for example, one of the first coders I fired the next day because he was just not right for the job, right? And it was just, he just wasn't right for the job. Good coder, but the people that I have working for me are extremely good, and they know what's going on.
And I suppose there's a compatibility in any business. So I work for a corporate, but within any corporation, it's always a subset of a subset of a subset, and you're part of one team, and then you're part of another team, and the sort of the technology area of my business, I think a lot of it personalities. Now, it's not necessarily as easy to fire someone because they don't fit a sort of compatibility perhaps in the business, but I think it's incredibly important that makeups of teams, and there should be that should complement each other. So if you're a creative ideas man, you need someone who's going to know the detail and be able to work with the detail. So I always I've talked a couple of times on my podcast about makeup of teams are incredibly important, and have diversity within your groups. You don't want the same, like you don't want 5 or 6 of you in your team, because you do everything from the creative side to the technical side. You need people to deliver what your vision is as well. So has it taken a while to get the right people? Are you sort of comfortable with your makeup of your team? I'm not saying like, are you going to fire anyone tomorrow or anything like that? I'm not suggesting that. But do you know what I mean? Just more like, has it been a constant thing of finding the right people, or did you find the right mix and you've now got that and you're stuck, you're settled and happy with that?
Yeah, it did. I mean, it did take a little while. Now, the way that I do things, so when you work for Mammoth, the whole point is that you want to do something and produce something at the end of the day. I've been through so many jobs where, you feel you like, what I got paid today, but I didn't really do anything, right? So at Mammoth, you can point at the end of the month, you can say, I built all these things. Like I either built this small extension, or I built this course. I edited these videos, and I can point to it, right? And you can say, this is the thing I've done. It's an output that we've done here. So not everyone's like that, though. Some people need to be more of like they just don't like producing so much. They need to be kind of like, I'll fix this thing, or I'll make this look a little bit better, but they don't need to be producing things as much as it can. So the people that have left, they don't quite want to do that production as much.
So now, as CEO and leader of your business, do you do much coding, developing at this stage of your career?
I do. And, I was thinking about this the other day. A lot of people do those Sudoku, like on the train or whatever. Yeah. And, one of the things that you can do is, if you want to expand your mind, is you can just code. Like, it doesn't have to be a product or anything. It happens that if you learn to code, there's a possible job waiting for you in the future. Yeah. But, I've been through this multiple times in my career where, I've got like a really big check and I like took the month off. Right. But at the end of the month, you expect to be happier because you took all this time off, but I wasn't. So I need to do something, right? And I always need to produce something. So I do constantly code. And, right now, Mammoth is consulting as well. So I need to keep up on the technology. So even if I spend an hour or two trying to code through something, I can learn the logistics of it so that I can use it in my consulting.
Oh, interesting. So, so there's no aspiration to be purely business. You want to. So do you develop your courses? Do you develop the coding within those courses? Obviously, the consultancy business is something slightly different because you need to be on top of everything and be able to talk to people about the most up to date, if it's a technology or if it's a business, the new thing that's gonna hit the market. So do you have different hats? I suppose that's my question. Do you one day you develop, or are you constantly flitting between your consultancy, your coding, your CEO, etc.? How does it work for you?
So as a small company, you generally have to wear different hats, right? Like when you're in corporate, like everything is a lot more streamlined. But yeah, essentially. So again, I always look to what the trend is, and I get a lot of people asking me, do I need this for my technical projects? Okay. Yeah. And I say, well, you can hire me as a consultant and I can do that. I can tell you what you need, right? So that's like the new thing that has come to me. And this is actually fairly recent in business. But the short answer is the way that I do things, I develop something in a system to do a particular task, and then I make sure I automate it. So the course production, all automated. And it actually took me 9 months to figure out how to do this, because it used to be just me. So it used to be just me, and then I hired a bunch of people, but it took me 9 months to figure out how to do that cost effectively, right? Yeah. I mean, you can do something cost ineffectively really easily, but to do it cost effectively is really hard. And so now I'm coding a few things to get that to be completely automated. Right. And there's always something that I need to do, and then so to kind of figure out the way to do it the most efficient way possible, and then I move it over to be automated.
And so this process is an interesting concept about automating, because when you're working through like, for example, I've just left my job, so I'll talk a little bit about not having very much to do in a minute. But when you're leaving a job, there's a lot of responsibility on me to be able to put down what I do in my day down on paper. So people at a later stage, when they need to pick something up, they have the details, they know how it's done and the processes. How from your sort of side of automation, what's different? How do you do that? Like, do you automate it by somebody else doing it for you, or are you coding something to automate that you click a button and it moves? So for example, this podcast, if I could automate it by having a process which I just press a button, which then puts it to YouTube, puts it to my podcast, etc., etc., etc. What's the sort of level of, or in your business, do you document versus build something that is literally someone else can come in and click a button and it does those 10 tasks that you do?
Yeah, so that's another big buzzword in technology is automation. But you have to remember that the idea of just like, pushing a button and having a computer do everything for you, in some cases it might work, but it's still, you need some human interaction with that. So what I mean by automation is that I'm not a part of the process, meaning that, I can take a 4-week vacation and the business is not up in flames. Like, that's what I mean by automate. Yeah. So And the way that I do it is, for me, I always have, like, if you think of a building, you've got a bunch of blocks or a bunch of raw parts that make a building. So I always say, okay, is there a better way that I can do this at 1/10 the cost than literally all my other competition? And if I hadn't done that, like, Mammoth would not be around today. So by doing that, I not only try to figure out the best way to get a product out there, but to do it in such a way that it is way more cost effective than literally everybody else.
That's really interesting. That's really interesting because from a very personal point of view here, and it's not all about me, it's about you, but the podcast stuff that I'm doing now, I'm at that point of sort of, I would imagine in the next maybe 6 months, it's going to be a sort of tipping point before I need to get some of the stuff done, maybe automated by another person sort of supporting me, because at the moment it's all done myself. I do everything from the recording to the editing to the posting to the login to the social media. The whole creation is as you said, that bootstrapped is based on my and from a very personal point of view. So any sort of tip for sort of making a process that it's less about me and that anyone could pick up, I could employ someone to pick up those jobs or those tasks quickly and effectively?
Sure. So I kind of do that already with my video editor. So when I picked this up from, I worked at Starbucks a long time ago, right?
You didn't put that in your LinkedIn profile.
I didn't put it in my LinkedIn, right? But it wasn't just a random job, right? I actually went there to learn how a $1 billion business works. And the thing about Starbucks that I learned, and this is one of the things, it's like, even if you're at a job, you could probably learn something new for your career. But at Starbucks, they do something that nobody else does. Their managers can do every task underneath them. Okay. And then, I was thinking about this, like, can I apply that to my business? And I know how to do everybody else's task. Okay. Right. So if someone says this is going to take 30 hours, I'm like, no, it's not going to take that. I could do it in 5. So maybe take more than 10, right? You know what I mean? So, and in the business world, in the technical world, this happens as well. Like, Elon Musk knows everything about his business. Okay. And that's probably the best example of it. And as a CEO, if you're going to be your own business, you need to know everybody's task to at least a certain degree, right? Because that way, you know how much things cost. Like, if you need to build this cool widget for your website and someone says, this is going to cost $30,000, you're going to say, no, that doesn't cost $30,000. If you know what things cost and how to do things, you'll be a better CEO. So for you, you want to do your video editing, and you can say, okay, this is what I want to do. And if you spend this amount of time, you should be able to do a better job than me. Now, what's interesting is that when I automate it, I want to make sure the person's doing a better job than I ever could. And all of my employees do that. So they do a better job than I could because they're focusing just on that one task. Whereas my day is like, okay, I need to section it off into these different sections.
So interesting. So thank you for that little bit of consultancy.
There you go.
So you were saying that if you took a month off, you might be bored because you're not in the sort of throes of your business. I from a very personal point of view, I've left my current job last Friday and starting my next job in the following Monday. So I've got basically a week off. I basically stacked back a lot of this podcast stuff for this week. So we've got an interview here. I've got another interview later on in the week. I've got other sort of things that are sort of coming up that I've produced in this week. And it's interesting, if I just stopped doing the podcasting stuff, although my wife would be very, very pleased that all of the jobs around the house would be done, which I am doing as well, please be noted. But I think I would find, so this is my side hustle, and I think I would find a sort of a less appreciation, not to go too deep, but appreciation of life and just sort of your priorities and how you do those things. So I do think I 100% agree with the side hustle. I've talked a lot on podcasts and sort of videos about the 70-20-10 principle, and sort of, so you should have your 70%. But for me, it's my career. The 20% is like the podcast and the YouTube. The 10% is a myriad of a lot of other things, which sort of I'm sort of testing to see if there's any traction on that. Would you subscribe to the 70-20-10, or as CEO, do you have 20 of those things which you need to keep on top of?
Yeah. So, even myself, I read an article about, different side hustles. I'm like, that sounds actually kind of fun, but to do in your spare time. But that for most people, having a side hustle or something that you can just point back to and say, I did this.
Yeah.
I find that, over time, you look back at your life and you say, okay, yeah, I did that. And it does feel really good. One of the best pieces of advice I've ever received is that your future self is always looking back on you, right? So you want to make your future self proud by doing a good job today. So, I've produced a lot of courses, a lot of games, and, some of those games have done decently well for a day or two in the App Store, but I haven't made Angry Birds or anything like that.
Yeah.
So even if you're not super successful, you can be proud of yourself that you got something done. Yeah. And not only is it good from a money point of view, it's good from a personal health point of view.
Yeah. So as we talk about side hustle, so you've got a new course. I think it's called Side Hustle and Entrepreneurial course. Tell me about it.
Yeah, so this was one of the most requested courses from my user base. And what I basically did is, since I've been an entrepreneur, since I was basically in high school, I decided to put everything I know into a course. And it's a very highly edited video course. Okay. And it has everything I know, everything you need to know about setting up a side hustle, all the tips and tricks that you need, and plus all the things that I personally failed at, right? Too. So, and it's good to talk about that. That's another thing about failures is if you're just open with it, and you just talk to some people, you can say, I made a really bad mistake here. And what, and someone might say, hey, that happened to me too. Right. Mm-hmm. But guess how I got over it? And then all of a sudden you've learned something. Right. Yeah. So this course not only talks about, side hustles, but it has a budgeting section as well.
Right.
Over the years, I've found out that if you are really good at budgeting, you will be richer just by taking 30 minutes a week to just plug some things into a spreadsheet. Yeah. You will be, it's about what you save. Right. So, I put that in the course as well.
Awesome. So sort of on moving that forward, just about entrepreneurship, what sort of, if I say soft skills, what sort of skills outside of coding and something very technical, what sort of skills would you say are important for an entrepreneur?
Okay, so I'm glad you brought up soft skills, because as a coder, this is the number one thing you need to learn, believe it or not, outside of the coding. It's so true. But I actually I'm an introvert, right? Okay. And I just like sitting in my room and building things. And it was really hard for me to just go out and meet people. So, just networking is a great way to make your business. But, just simple soft skills. My favorite tip is to talk more about the other person than about yourself. And my favorite hack is to not bring business cards.
Okay.
You only collect business cards, and then you email them afterwards, because everyone wants to hand out their business cards, right? Yeah. So if you collect them, it's people want to give you their business cards. So that's my favorite kind of hack.
So if we've got, let's just explore that a little bit further, because I work with coders who have no interest in the business side at all. If you give them a task to build an app or build something, they're happy as Larry to work on that for 2 or 3 months or 2 or 3 weeks, whatever it is. But from someone who is introverted, would you say something, because I think these sorts of skills are practice. I think a lot of, if you feel uncomfortable networking, then do you know what? go to a networking event and sort of dip in and dip out, but keep on going back. So you'd go in and you'd go and speak to someone, and you'd have whether it's a good conversation or a bad conversation, depending on the other person. It's not always down to you. But if you're finding yourself a little bit, I say panic, that's probably an extreme version, but it's just like apprehensive, then step out, compose yourself, then go back in. And it's sort of it's I can't remember the psychological description, but it's essentially sort of like immersing yourself into something that you don't feel very comfortable in, but equally giving yourself that time or space to breathe, calm yourself, and then go in again. Is there any would you say that immersion techniques are powerful for someone to be taught those business skills and those networking skills?
Yeah. So you just have to understand that it's like a skill like anything else. And, going back 15 years, I was really not good at it. But over the years, reading a few articles here and there and just kind of improving on it, then it eventually works out. You can always go to a different city where you know nobody.
Yes,
and just I always throw myself right off the deep end, right? And just go into it. So you can just go somewhere where you don't know anybody. Yeah. And then it might be easier, it might be harder. And just you basically just have to practice. Yes,
I 100% agree. Practice is one of the critical, and trying to work out all the different scenarios before you're getting ready for it. Just it's sort of taking a little bit of aside, and so mentors, have you had a mentor, and whether it's something that's paid for, whether it's someone that's experienced that you've known or have known in your friends or family, did you explore, did you need a mentor? How did you develop those, or did you develop those skills through using mentors?
I haven't done that, but you know what? It's something that I think everyone needs. Even top CEOs have a person to talk to. Yep. It's kind of like a business counselor, if you will, right? Yep. So it's probably good to have someone to do that. I've never done that personally, but I might look into that. So,
but it's interesting because as reading various books and things, like Bill Gates' mentor was Warren Buffett.
Yeah.
Mark Zuckerberg's was Steve Jobs before he passed. And I think a lot of the things that I've talked about also is that mentorship is very important. Whether it's something that you, whether that the person even knows they're your mentor, it's sometimes a little bit cliched now of having a mentor. So it might just be someone that you work with who's more experienced and sort of shares their knowledge with you, all the way to the extreme of actually formally paying for it. There's a whole myriad of what a mentor is and who that person can be. I found it incredibly important and incredibly helpful in the way that I've conducted my career. And I'm always someone that whether it's someone that you need, it's sometimes helpful just to, as you say, a career coach, someone to bring you along and give you a little bit of guidance. So I would definitely be an advocate of that. Even as a successful businessman, I think it's important. And so just coming back to your career, so you've been based in education for a long time now. Why was education? Was it something that you sort of fell into, and sort of then just found new ways of being able to educate other people?
So yeah, I did kind of just fall into it. But at the same time, if you're going to build something, and want to improve people's lives, education is probably one of the best things to do.
Yeah.
One of the best kind of things to do. And what's actually interesting is that, in the next decade, e-learning is going to be one of the biggest industries out there. And so I have quite a bit of experience in that. And, I do consult with some companies, some e-learning companies and some education companies as well about, curriculum or just kind of basically, logistics and whatever. But it's something that I do enjoy doing. But at the same time, one of the things about making courses that no one really talks about is that it's really hard. Like, making coding courses is really difficult because not only do you have to be a good coder, you have to have a good, presentation skills, and you have to make the code easy, because if you've ever been a coder, I mean, sometimes the code you look at is incredibly complicated, right? But if you make incredibly complicated code for your coding courses, you're going to get 1-star reviews, right? So,
Yeah.
I mean, so it's actually really difficult to do that.
And as you say, with all this sort of cyclical from the creative to the technical, you've got to be able to explain yourself. You've got to be able to explain your code, why you went in that particular avenue. And I think that's really a good point. Like you've demonstrated in your career, in your business, is that to balance that creativity that you need to run a course or consult, or versus the technical, being able to develop and do the coding. I think it's a really interesting concept, and I would say it's a good balance between getting both out of you and getting the business working as best. So if you were to give one piece of advice about investing in a business or as an entrepreneur, or even in yourself, whether that's someone on one of your courses, what sort of techniques would you give for investing in yourself?
So if you're going to invest in yourself, you have to make sure that you are a good investment. And, one of the things that I learned is, when I first started.
Hold up a second. Sorry. Can we just pause for a minute? So as I was saying, what advice would you give for my listeners on how to invest in a business or as an entrepreneur, or even in themselves on online courses?
Yeah. So if you're going to invest in yourself, specifically, you want to make sure that you're a good investment. And one of the things I learned, working at one of my odd jobs when I wasn't an entrepreneur, is that if I had a week off, I wouldn't spend 40 hours working on my business. I'd spend maybe like 10 or 20, and then the rest of the time I'd be doing something else. Right. Yeah. So, you should really take it upon yourself to work as hard as you work at a job, right? Yeah. Or even hard. In fact, you have to work a little bit harder than you do at a job. So, so you have to, so if you're going to invest in yourself, you have to make sure that you're working really hard to do. And some people, they're not meant to be entrepreneurs, and I understand that. And if that's you, that's okay. It was a self realization thing that you did, right? For me, I like working with people. But I've really liked entrepreneurship as well. And I knew, like, once I got my big hit on Udemy, that this was it. And I just put the pedal to the metal. And and at the time I was waiting for a big push, and that was it. Awesome.
So I'm going to wrap up now. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate your time. Where can people find you? What's the best place to find you, either on social media or your website?
Yeah, so the best place, you can take a look at our website, mammothinteractive.com. You can also follow us on Twitter. It's at Mammoth Company. That's probably the best way to get our news as quickly as possible. You can follow me personally. It's at John Bura. And if you want to go to Udemy, you can type in Mammoth Interactive, and you can see all of our courses there.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I'm sure a lot of my listeners will get a lot of inspiration from your story. So thank you very much. Right, to wrap up, for me, I just want to let everyone know that the podcast will be out on Sunday nights in the UK, that is. Please check it out on the usual places: iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, etc. There also is, you can find me on Twitter, on Instagram as well, at Mark J. Hayward, and check me out on YouTube. Also, I've just opened a Patreon account, so if anyone wants to check in there, there's some benefits on there as well. So be most welcome for you guys to join me on Patreon, and you kind of get a behind the scenes look as well. So I'm trying to just test that out and explore that as a different kind of medium. So thank you, John. Thank you everyone for listening, and you'll speak to me soon. Thanks a lot.